And now you have very quickly, like at checkout, you've captured the ID of that attendee. You've captured the ticket ID of the attendee and validate that against the database to say, hey, are you allowed here or not allowed here? Did you pay for this ticket or not pay for this ticket? Did you get it or not? So all of those applications of barcodes just make things more accurate and much faster.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chains, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reid.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
We just had a really interesting conversation with Rich Eicher from codeREADr. He talked about what codeREADr is and what it does, the importance of good quality data and how that can impact tons of nodes of the supply chain. He talked about different technologies that the industry is using and codeREADr is using and seeing, 2D barcodes, RFID. He's also talked about how AI is gaining traction in the AIDC world, which stands for automatic identification data capture. It was really a fascinating conversation.
Hey, Rich, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm glad you can carve out some time with us today. Before we jump into the conversation, if you would, just for our audience, just give us a little bit of background of yourself, where you're working today, what you do, just kind of a quick intro.
Sure. Happy to do that. So I'm a founding member of codeREADr Inc., which is a SaaS platform. It's used to configure data capture, data collection, data validation, really pretty much anything and everything to do with barcode scanning and the use of the scan data and associated data for all different types of applications, from ticket scanning to attendance tracking to one of the biggest areas is logistics, whether at retail level or in the supply chain. And I've been doing that for 15 years. And we started literally back when BlackBerry devices were still the rage. We had quarter VGA screens. We had cameras that were, pretty good, right? But not nearly what we have today. And what we decided was, after requests from customers, we decided to take advantage of what would eventually become ubiquitous use of smartphones and tablets in the market, and use the built-in cameras of those smartphones to scan barcodes. And that really took off, and that was really great. But in addition to that, we found that we also needed to be able to work with the dedicated devices, like the Zebras and the Honeywell dedicated scanning devices that factories like to use, that warehouses like to use. So we enabled the use of those devices as well. And I'd say over the last 15 years, we've done very well and have become a leader in the market. So that's a little bit about me and about, the company.
Excellent. Liz, I am so excited to jump into some of the technical aspects, but please jump in.
So I'm going to start with a non-technical aspect, and something that you said always piques my interest is barcodes. And Reid and I, and Rich, that there's lots of different kinds of barcodes, from the ones that you scan at point of sale, but you talked about logistics and things like that. So not all barcodes are created equal. Just talk to us about the barcodes that you see out there. And I would love to hear, even though, we're supply chain, you talked about tickets and attendance too. I'm assuming that's concerts and things like that. I think of also my kids at school, but talk to us a little bit about all the different barcodes and the uses of them.
Well, there's actually about 50 different barcode types that have historically been used for a variety of applications, mostly business actually, or, related to some institutional use, library books, for example. But by far and away, the most commonly used is the UPC code. The UPC code everyone knows from the products that they buy every day from your supermarket or Lowe's or Home Depot. Wherever you go, there's items, and those items have a barcode on it, and that's typically a UPC code. So I'd like to stop here for a second before I talk about the other code types. As part of what one of the things that we can discuss today is UPC standards were set globally by GS1, and that has been really critical because think of a checkout line, right? It's fast because the system scanning knows what data is embedded in that barcode, and their processing of that data is built into their systems. So, for example, let's say something didn't have a barcode and you're at a checkout, right? And we've all had this happen, right? You're at the checkout and you put your vegetables on the counter, and it doesn't have a barcode. In some cases it does, but in a lot of cases it doesn't. And if it doesn't have a barcode, what do you have to do? You have to look it up, right? And how long does that take, right? What is it? What is it packaged in? All this other information you have to fill in. Now that's scanned at the point of sale, and they have that data now for processing the cost and that you purchased it. Well, can you imagine if UPCs weren't standard? Imagine if, like, for a large number of the items that you put on the counter, they needed to do that type of lookup. Well, it's really not ideal, and it takes a lot of time, and certainly the checkout lines would be very long. So UPC is like the most popular and the one I think most people are familiar with. But let's talk about the QR codes. The QR codes have become very popular because they were one of the first that could be read on a mobile device. So that QR code would be sent to someone's device, and the ticketing location that was scanning your barcode to see whether or not it was a valid ticket could easily scan a QR code, not only printed, but also on the mobile device. So they became very popular. But now, along with some of the initiatives with GS1 Sunrise 2027, QR codes have become increasingly used on packaging and will be even more so because it could be used for many, many different things.
I'm glad you brought up the Sunrise 2027. So Sunrise, and being in IT for so many years, we would sunset products, right? It's like you'd get a message from Microsoft or IBM, this product's no longer going to be supported after this future date. But this one is just the opposite. It's in 2027, majority of retailers will be accepting QR codes at checkout. So today they take the traditional 1D straight black lines, black and white lines for the UPC code, as you mentioned, and now they'll be able to take that and move over to the QR codes and 2D barcodes, at checkout, which they don't read today because there is a little nuance in the technical aspects of it. But we're seeing a lot of retailers and brands testing it very successfully now. So appreciate you bringing that up. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of barcodes to businesses, but I also had a quick little question. So before we get into the importance of the barcode, so Liz, two-part question here. You mentioned earlier, Rich, cameras, and then you mentioned, manufacturers like Zebra and Honeywell and others that are in the space. And I've seen both a laser barcode reader and a camera barcode reader. And at a lot of grocery stores, you see both, right? They actually have a camera in the bottom and a laser on the side. So you're not kind of getting hit in the eyes with the laser. But does your company codeREADr work with both, or is it only with the camera optics reading, or do you work with laser reading as well? I was just curious.
So we started out really focusing just on the camera for a number of reasons, but most importantly, the smartphones and the tablets that were offered for consumers wouldn't have a laser. It wouldn't have a scanner like that. So in fact, very early on, maybe as early as 2010 and 11, when we were in our first few years of introducing codeREADr to the market, the companies in warehousing and manufacturing felt that they didn't want to use smartphones. Instead, they wanted to use those dedicated devices like the Zebra and the Honeywell. So
rugged mobile devices, and
they can drop them, throw them against the wall. In fact, that's what the argument was against smartphones was, can you throw your smartphone against the wall? The answer is, of course, no. Who would do that, right? They were making the point that, yeah, smartphones aren't rugged. And that's generally true. There's a lot of arguments to go back and forth about this. But finally, we have to listen to the customer. And the customer said, we sometimes want to use smartphones and we sometimes want to use our dedicated devices. So we said, okay, we have to be able to be used for both, right? And just FYI, the lasers are used, but the laser is often used for the aimer. We call it an aimer. It's got an LED in there, and they're aiming at what you're supposed to scan. So it's called the aimer. And inside that aimer hardware, there's also a camera. So even the laser scanning had to switch to camera scanning, though a little bit different than the typical camera on a smartphone. But basically a camera scanning through, it's called an imager. So similar to a camera, just for a lot of these dedicated devices, it gives you the option to scan things that are very far away, 30, 40 feet away. Think of like in a warehouse. You can use drones to scan barcodes, but if you are a person in a truck or just a cart and you want to scan something that's far away, that aimer helps. And then the ability of that imager to capture something far away is very important for them. Yeah, so we realized that we have to enable both, so the customer had the choice.
Yeah. The second part is, the importance of using barcodes. And you brought it up earlier, tickets, attendance tracking, logistics. I've seen them on IoT devices. You go to a hotel today and the first thing you're hit with is, do you want to use your YouTube, Netflix, or Prime? And you have a QR code up there as well. I mean, it's almost mystifying. Like, what am I doing and why? And it's just walking me through it. But can you talk a little bit about some of the critical success factors that barcodes are providing to businesses and why organizations are making the shift and leveraging them?
In the same way we talked about UPC codes at the checkout, at this point, we can't really imagine what it would be like without having a barcode there. There are other technologies becoming more popular, like RFID, NFC, not so much, but RFID in particular. But back to the barcode, to do the checkout effectively right now, you need a barcode on the item, right? We said that checking out a fruit or vegetable without one would take you much longer. So think about other use cases, taking, for example, attendance, right? How do I know who attended? There are technologies like Bluetooth for automated attendance tracking, which have had some limited success, but generally it's not nearly as efficient and controlled an environment as using a barcode, either one that's embedded in or printed upon an application, a mobile application, or one that's printed on an ID card. Scanning that with a smartphone or dedicated scanner becomes very easy. And now you have very quickly, like at checkout, you've captured the ID of that attendee. You've captured the ticket ID of the attendee and validate that against the database to say, hey, are you allowed here or not allowed here? Did you pay for this ticket or not pay for this ticket? Did you get it or not? So all of those applications of barcodes just make things more accurate and much faster.
Yeah, so it's the accuracy and the speed is the biggest impact to the business. Makes sense.
So, quick story. Rich, you talked about products with no barcodes. Typically, those are going to be vegetables. I was at the store on Sunday and I got some cheese in a package. No barcode. I came home and totally geeked out over this no barcode product because they had to get out their phone for the grocery store app and figure out what that UPC code is and put it in. I mean, it took 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And for me, whatever. But I can't imagine on a large scale having that happen. So I'm sure it was a mistake. This poor company is going to be hearing a lot from public and be like, Come on, we need our barcode. Anyway, just my question really is about issues, and that's one, not having a barcode. But do barcodes and what issues can be uncovered if barcodes are either reused or an incorrect barcode is obtained in the supply chain? Like, what kind of problems can that cause?
Again, let's think of the checkout. Suppose they reuse a UPC code. Let's say you're a wine manufacturer and you had a certain vintage and you didn't want to, get a new barcode for it. So you just used an old vintage barcode and you put that on the bottle, right? So let's just say that the old vintage wine sold for $300 a bottle and they put it on or use that barcode, not physically remove the barcode from another bottle, but just print that UPC code on the other bottle of wine. And let's say that bottle of wine is $30. Well, at checkout, the system might think of that barcode as the $300 barcode, and that'll be your bill to pay. Well, you'll probably catch that, right? $300 is a gross, difference between $30 and $300. But finally, for some of the smaller differences, you may not recognize the difference, but I don't think that would happen as much as like incorrectly using a barcode, let's say one that doesn't really exist. Well, there's no data that would exist in people's systems about these non-standard barcodes that you just, generated on your own. No point of sale system will be able to recognize it. And then they'll have to stop and think, well, what is this? And they'll have no way to manage inventory, check discrepancies, shipping errors. It might even lead to a product recall if it's got a bad barcode on it.
Yeah, it's very interesting because life is always this way. You have early adopters, late adopters, disruptors. And so we have a lot of these delivery service offerings now, right? And they consider themselves IT companies because how do you get funding without considering yourself an IT company, I guess? But they're leveraging barcode scanning, but they're running into challenges. They'll have I'm getting X can of soda and the delivery person will go into the store, scan it, but they get a false read back. And a lot of times it's because the retailer is providing the inventory of what they have available and they haven't updated their UPC information. So they're getting, hey, I need to get a 6-pack of XYZ soda. And it's a 6-pack of XYZ soda. Everyone knows it's right. Everyone knows this is it. But you scan it and the computer says, yeah, that's the wrong one. It doesn't match what they're saying in the inventory because in the inventory, it was, an 18-pack. This is where human and technology kind of come into place. It's like we've always heard computers are never wrong. Humans are wrong. This is one of those scenarios and it's a blend and it's a challenge out there. Like Liz, I guess you were talking about a very common grocery store and you went to the cheese section and there was no UPC on it. But in those areas too, they're typically making potato salad and other things and they're not putting UPCs on. Sometimes they are in real time, but a lot of times they're just boom, like as my kids would say, Dad, in the olden days. They just put this is $2.99 or, whatever.
We've been talking about grocery stores and maybe buying a bottle of wine that's too expensive or more expensive. But in reality, it's much more significant than that. Think about healthcare, right? Think about GS1 clinical trial technology and things like that, or just generally in healthcare and how important data is, right? You have to be able to identify the patient. You have to be able to identify the patient and identify the medicine that they're getting. And then you have to identify the dosage. And all of that has to not only be validated, right? It also has to be recorded. So in healthcare and technologies or applications like that, it becomes a lot more serious than inventory being off. It can be life and death, literally life and death.
Yeah. I met yesterday with our head of healthcare here at GS1 US, and we were talking because in healthcare, they use a 2D barcode, but it's not a QR code. It's a GS1 data matrix. And that was decided by the FDA way before COVID, way before other things, because these things have been out for 30 plus years. And she informed me that they're actually speaking with two of the more common phone providers out there now, because they can inherently read QR codes, but they can't inherently read GS1 data matrix or other data matrix. And so, Rich, as you kind of indicated before, it was, hey, we want to use dedicated hardware, and now we want to use our personal phones. We're seeing that move over to the healthcare side as well. So very, very interesting. We're getting close on time. I wanted to get into one last question before we move to our two that we always wrap up with. And Rich, you brought up RFID and NFC. So RFID, for those that don't know, is radio frequency identification, and NFC is near frequency communication, I believe. One, NFC are in phones. You use it for your most common Apple Pay and other things, your touchless paying. But RFID isn't in these personal phones. Rich, my question to you is, are you seeing other innovations on the horizon around, barcode use and data carriers? Or do you want to just talk a little bit about RFID and NFC and where you're seeing it really come into play? Just curious about other trends that are happening outside of just barcodes.
NFC is popular, as you indicated, for payments. It's been taking many, 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 many years to take off, but one of the primary reasons for it is the hardware required for you to pay at the point of sale, for example. That's one of the biggest areas where they use NFC. And it's growing and will continue to grow. And then there's peer-to-peer, NFC to NFC, my phone to your phone, and so forth. RFID, again, that's taken a long time to take off because there's a cost to it. You have to have a physical tag on the item. You need to have a reader. The readers aren't standard. There's a reason why smartphones and tablets can't read RFID. The amount of power it needs in order to be able to read an RFID tag that's, let's say, more than 2 feet away is very significant. And I don't see the smartphone providers adding something like that, but it can nonetheless be done through dedicated devices. So we know that because the codeREADr app is used for RFID as well. For us, we just think of it as another way to capture data. I think, though, there's something that I'd like to mention about technology and artificial intelligence is really gaining traction in our AIDC business, data capture business. For example, we use ChatGPT right now for generating complex regular expressions. Now, why do I mention that here? So in the same way that the GS1 standard for UPC codes was so critical in many different industries, but in particular in retail, so too are the GS1 barcodes for code 128, data matrix, as you mentioned, for medical, and QR code for retail and supply chain. Well, ChatGPT, we've been able to generate a technology or create a technology that not only will be a GS1 decoder for all the GS1 application identifiers within these complex barcodes, but it'll also be able to use, scan, process, and decode barcodes that are either not GS1 or not compliant fully with the GS1 standards. And the importance there is, in particular for the supply chain, think of like the manufacturers, the importers, the exporters first, the importers, the distribution network, and then the retail. They all need to talk, right? They all need to have reference to the same data. And without those standards, it's extremely difficult to make that work. And what we've done using ChatGPT and artificial intelligence is to be able to create a tool that when people are scanning It'll parse a fully compliant GS1, a barcode, no problem. Parse it and decode it and make it immediately useful, whether on the edge or in the cloud. But also create these regular expressions through ChatGPT and this tool to be able to say, okay, well, you know what? This is not exactly the right, format, but we can pick from it that which is needed for that process. And the customer can just configure that on their own. So I think while RFID and NFC are interesting, the most interesting, I think, is going to be artificial intelligence, machine learning, and what it's going to do for our business. We've already seen it, and we offer this options to customers, and they love it too because it makes it so much easier.
So we're running out of time, and we have one final question for you before we wrap up. So this is either in your personal life or your professional life. What is the favorite technology that you're using right now?
I really have to go with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. I think a lot of people use artificial intelligence, maybe ChatGPT, as an alternative to a search engine, right? If you prompt, that's what their word is. If you prompt, you ask the right question, you really get great answers, and it's so fast. Bringing that into the business world, technology, to product development, AIDC, auto ID and data capture, it's really amazing what it can do. Like, if you want to find ways to solve problems, and everyone in the supply chain business has issues with problem solving, right? How do I get this box identified, and where does it go in the warehouse? Where was it, right? All that. ChatGPT and tools, little sales pitch like codeREADr, do allow you the flexibility to take those. It's not really a JavaScript or anything. It's really more a description of exactly how to accomplish a certain goal that you may not have thought of, that ChatGPT or others like that can help you, find a solution for those problems.
Yeah, it has truly blown my mind on how fast this has really evolved, taken off, and being adopted, and how fast it works. Like, I don't use it every day. I probably use it once a month on average throughout the year. And a lot of times it's helping me write things, write letters or responses or documents. And I'll take things, PDFs, summarize this for me. Super fast. Like, it's amazing. Or, hey, I want to write a letter to my sister. She's my best friend, but also my mentor. And she's funny, but, serious. And in seconds, it spits out this amazing letter that I need to take some things out, put some things in. But it's like, wow, that's what I wanted to say. It's very cool. Well, Rich, that's all the time we have for today. Can't thank you enough for spending the time with us and expanding our horizons into other areas and usage of barcodes. And we thank you, and we wish you all the best with the rest of this year. We'll be talking again soon.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and nice to talk again with you, Liz and Reid. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.